Before we move ahead to next season, we need to take a look back to learn from this season so that we don't repeat it. First up, the guards. Hey, Pac, let's go.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. Welcome in to the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I am your host. Joining me, as he does every Wednesday, is our guy, Coach Pac Kilby, right over there. We want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or your first watch every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Pac, I had a bunch of people yesterday from yesterday's show, I should say, in the comments worried or concerned about me because I was kind of talking like this and I was being really, well, the truth is we've got family staying with us. We got spring break going on. So I was in a different location in my house yesterday. I was trying not to wake people up. So I was kind of just doing one of these, but I really appreciate everyone's thoughts. Like, people were genuinely like, Isaac, brother, I hope you're okay. You're not bringing your energy. Like you look a little down. All is well. I'm riding the March Madness high, despite the Tar Heels not being in it. But seriously, everyone, thank you for your thoughts. Today on the show, as I said, we're going to be looking at the backcourt from this past year. So we're going to start by talking about what they did well, what we liked, what things we'd like to see carried on into next season. We're then going to switch to talking about things that maybe, less good things, or you might go so far as to call them bad, that we'd like to see changed or updated for next year. And then we'll finish with our Unpacking It segment, as we do every week with Coach Pac Kilby, where we talk about, okay, what would a coach want the backcourt to be working on this offseason ahead of next year? And so we're going to be taking these shows in shifts with Pac each of the next 3 Wednesdays. So today is the backcourt. Next week, we'll do the same thing with wings. And then I could go for some wings right now, Pac. And then 2 weeks from now, we will do the front court and take a look back at them as well. So, Pac, let's just unpack who we're going to be talking about today. Remember, this is just the guards, specifically the 1 and 2. We're not going to look at anyone who plays specifically the 3 or moonlights as a 4 or moonlights as a 2. So we're just talking about RJ Davis, Caleb Love, DeMarco Dunn, and Seth Trimble. Just those 4 guys today. And we'll get to the others in the coming weeks. So that is the scope of our conversation. Pac, let me start with you. What did you see from this quartet, or maybe some of the individuals or the starting backcourt of the bench? You take it wherever you want to go first this year that you really liked.
Yeah, I'll start individually. And I'll start with the bench. So DeMarco, pleasant surprise.
Very
I
pleasant.
thought he was better than what I originally thought he was going to be. In fact, I'm looking forward to seeing him continue to improve. I think he could be a really key piece for us next year. I really like Trimble. He leaves some things to be desired offensively for now. But, man, he brings an edge defensively. And I think that was something he did really well for us. I think that RJ is just phenomenal, which anyone that listens regularly knows that I'm high on him. I think he lacked some consistency this year. A lot of that was probably due to his finger and that injury that he had there. But, man, I think he's a really, really sharp player, especially when he's getting his teammates involved. That's when he's at his best. And then Caleb, I think we can all agree this wasn't Caleb's best year, and that's not me dragging his name through the mud because I'm a Caleb Love fan. I just don't think it was the best. Yeah. But, Caleb, he still did some good things. He's streaky. He can score a lot in a hurry when he's on. when he gets after it defensively, I thought he showed signs of being a pretty good defender when he wanted to. And, he brings so much to the table, like with his body and his frame, his ability to rebound, his athleticism. We just got to find ways to get it from him more consistently. So what about you? What are you thinking individually?
The thing I like, the biggest thing for me was the healthy version of RJ, because it wasn't much, unfortunately, and it's that finger you just talked about. I know it's just one little thing that's how long is an index finger? 4 inches long? But just that one little thing, because a shooter's touch is so dialed in that even something as small as the tape around it can affect you so much. And at the two main sections, when that tape came off this year, my man was straight lights out. And I firmly believe that had RJ not had that injury, he would have been a first-team All-ACC player, and I firmly believe that would have been good for anywhere from 2 to 4 more victories from Carolina this year, and I don't think that's me overselling that. Folks, if you're listening or watching and you think that's me overselling it, please let us know. But I really don't think it is, because you saw, I mean, he was just literally over 50% from three in those games when he was healthy. That 5-game stretch there at the very end of the season, and then that stretch kind of right around the middle of the season before he re-injured it against Syracuse. And so that was the biggest thing. I thought RJ had the biggest leap forward because he had some great things last year, but I thought he took an even bigger leap this year. And then the second is the thing you mentioned, which off the bench, which is DeMarco. Just how many times have we said it and owned it? But DeMarco, from what we expected his role to be this year to what it actually was, I'm so proud of him and his development. I'm so proud of the fact that he didn't transfer last offseason and that he stuck around. I'm very hopeful that he realizes his worth to this team and stays around for next year, because I think there is another big leap he could take for what junior DeMarco Dunn will be. As for Seth Trimble, I am so proud of, like you said, there are some deficiencies, particularly with shooting. But I love that anytime he was called upon, he was going to give the best of what he was able to give this year, whether that was that ball hawking man-on-man defense, whether it was being like his distribution to Armando or his willingness to make a good entry pass was something that we didn't really see from any of these three other guards that we're talking about, at least the volume that he did it with. And so I'm excited to see what a year of development this offseason can really do for him next year. I still don't think he'll be a great shooter next year, but I think he will take a step forward. And as for Caleb, it's very similar to what you said. I thought, obviously he didn't shoot as well this year as he did last year. The hot streaks were shorter, but I thought there were more moments of really good decision-making, more so than he had his first 2 years. I still think there could be longer stretches of that, and I'm hopeful for that if indeed he does come back. Like, we've both guessed that Caleb will probably move on, but who knows, Pac? Who knows at this point? He very well could be back in Chapel Hill next year. And if so, I would expect to see even longer stretches of that. So individually, that is what I'm looking at from what was good with this unit. Anything else from you on the good side of things, either groupings or other things before we move on?
One positive that I really just thought about was, the fact that, this year it wasn't the best. We can all agree on that. But, there is a chance that we have all 4 of these guards back next year. I think at the very least we have 3 of the 4 back. In today's college basketball world, that's not really heard of. And that could be a huge difference for us next year. It's just another year of experience for DeMarco, another year of experience for Trimble. RJ continuing to get better and better and better. And when healthy, he's an elite first-team All-ACC type player. And then, if Caleb sticks around and gets a little bit more consistent, then, man, I'm just telling you, our backcourt could be extremely, extremely explosive on the offensive end. And then I think if given the right scheme and things, I think we could be really good defensively too. So I really like that. There's some positives there with that.
That's a great point about the defense. I would especially just with how the Tar Heels seem to be running their offense now under Coach Davis. I'd like to see the defense take a step forward, and I think they're capable of that. I want to agree with what you said about 3 of the 4 guards coming back, because here's how I see it playing out. If Caleb decides to leave, I think the other 3 stay, and you bring in Simeon Wilcher, and there's your 4. If Caleb decides to stay, I wouldn't be surprised if that forced out DeMarco, perhaps, right? Like knowing that, because I just can't see a backcourt that's got all 4 of those returners plus Simeon Wilcher coming in. Like I just don't see that going well next season. Because
unless maybe Coach Davis adapts and we go to a 3-guard system.
Ooh, I can get behind that. I love it. Yes, I loved it when we employed that this year. And I think a lot of it will depend on what he's able to find at the wing position in the transfer portal. Like if he's able to bring in some kind of just dude who can just bomb from 3, then I think it would be 2 and then a wing and a 4 and a 5. But yeah, man, that has very real possibilities on it. And frankly, I'm very in favor of it, as I was last offseason. Pac, we need to move on to the flip side of this. Some things that we saw this year that we'd like to see the Tar Heels improve on. I think there are several things, but we'll hone in on those. And we're going to do that in just a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from money line to point scores and three-pointers drained. So make sure you check out all of the FanDuel lines for this weekend's Sweet 16 matchups. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn all about it. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, Pac, let's turn our attention back to this. We started with backcourt. Yay! What were things that we saw this year that were good? And now let's turn our attention to backcourt, not so yay, of either individually or collectively, things that we would like to see the backcourt improve on ahead of the 2023-24 basketball season. Let me toss it to you to start, as we did with the last segment.
Yeah, so I'll hit it individually and then collectively, and then I'll pass it off to you. But
perfect.
Individually, I'm going to start with DeMarco again. To me, I think he's a solid defender. I really do. Where I would like to see him improve, and this might sound crazy because I think everybody thinks he can shoot it pretty well, but some of the other things I think he could do offensively with his athleticism and his explosiveness, getting stronger, putting some weight on, becoming a little more explosive, and just adding that dynamic to his game of being able to attack the rim and get strong finishes, and even just become more consistent as a shooter and becoming a consistent part of the offense. I think that would be huge. And we all know, even if, maybe he's starting, but if he's coming off the bench, which is what I anticipate, we could desperately use bench scoring. And somebody that can come off that bench and put the ball in the hole and provide some life for us. So that's something I would like to see him improve on. When you get to Trimble, obviously he needs to improve offensively. There's really not much to complain about with him defensively. I mean, the kid's just a workhorse on the defensive end. He's as strong as they come. He's got just incredible leaping ability to contest around the rim. But to me, I think he needs to improve in his shooting. And then also in some of his decision-making, I thought at times he got sped up a little bit and maybe did some things he wouldn't typically have done. But that's to be expected. He's a freshman playing at the highest level in college basketball. So to me, those are some things I think that naturally he will improve on, and then things he needs to work at. when you get to Caleb, just like you mentioned earlier, consistent stretches of good basketball. That to me is really important for him, and in particular, shot selection. I thought he did a much better job this year of not turning the ball over as much, but I think the big thing for him is going to be, can you take the right shots in the right moment? So that's something that, to me stands out with him. And then defensively, he's got to get better. Just guarding the basketball, keeping the ball in front, and, being consistent on that end, even when, it's not going well for him on the offensive end. I think that's something that's big for him. And then RJ, to me, I know this might sound a little bit biased, but he is my favorite guard we have. But to me, there's not a lot for him to improve on, other than, I guess you could say, consistency. But really, I thought a lot of that had to do with his injury. I think he would have been pretty consistent if it wasn't for that. But if I have to get picky with RJ, one thing I will say is I want to see him improve his tempo. I want to kind of get that Carolina basketball, getting the ball down the floor. And it's not always that he doesn't, run it down the floor. Sometimes I just think there's opportunities to pitch the ball ahead, and he doesn't.
Yep.
And maybe that's not him. Maybe that's Hubert. Maybe he doesn't want to do that as much, and he wants to set people to death and run their sets. And, I don't know. But I would like to see that from him. So that's my thing for him. And then overall, from our guard play, I think we need more consistency and more leadership. How many times this season did it feel like we had a lead and we squandered it, or we had a chance to make a run or take a lead and we squandered those opportunities? And a lot of it was bad shot selection.
Yep.
Some of it was turnovers, and
Yep.
some of it just flat out not doing a very good job of running offense. It was real stagnant. And so I would like to see us get better leadership and consistency from just our guard play as a whole. What do you got?
Man, that's great stuff. First off, Pac, and right there with you. Like, I just want to see Carolina continue to value the basketball really well. The turnovers overall, I thought, were down this year, but just a lot of wasted possessions at key critical moments where Carolina could have extended leads had they valued things more. I'll start in the same way you did. I'll go to DeMarco Dunn. I'll just try to add things that you didn't say. I'd like to see him, particularly if Coach Davis does go to a 3-guard lineup. I think he is the biggest potential for moving into like a Leaky role. A Leaky role who's a better shooter. I'm not saying DeMarco is going to start at the 3 or anything like that, but I could see moments where in a 3-guard lineup, he is the 3 because he's, from a height-wise perspective, the biggest of these guys. And he's rangy. You heard Coach Davis talk about how much he likes DeMarco's defense. I think with his athleticism, and I mean, he's sneaky athletic, right? And so I think there's some stuff he could bring there. And so I'd love to see him just continue to grow in confidence and to own the things that he does really well. For Seth Trimble, just plain and simple, shooting. I'm not expecting him to be a 35% three-point shooter next year. But I'd like to see him be someone who is confident enough to take the shots and makes it at least enough, like 30%, to where defenses have to honor it, right? And so that's just shot after shot after shot all summer long. And he might not be to that point till his junior or senior year, but now's when you start laying that foundation for it. For Caleb, you talked about decision-making with his shooting, so I'll talk about a different type of decision-making. I'd like to see – we saw what's the word I'm looking for? We saw moments, I'll say, of this year, but I want to see him get to the line even more, meaning I want to see him penetrate even more so that he can get fouled and get to the free throw line, where I expect him to – raise his percentage back up next season. It was down this year, but he's so good attacking that defenders really have to back off a little bit. And then once he opens that up, then he can start finding some space along the 3-point line. And so I want to see Caleb attack more and get to the rim, and then also make good, even more better decisions with sharing and distributing the basketball. For RJ, the two things I'll say to go along that I don't believe you talked about either of these. Number one is stopping penetration when he is a primary defender. Just too many times, and I don't want to use his height as an excuse in this. I think it's just not defensive shifting enough. I don't think it's that lateral. I think it's that lateral movement, and he's got the athletic ability to be able to do that. And so I don't know if it's like, hey, I'm putting in so much on the offensive end that I can't spare that energy defensively. I'm not sure what it is, but I'd like to see RJ ratchet that up a couple levels going forward. And then same thing with Caleb. I know RJ is little and getting in there amongst the trees is hard, but I want to see him get to the rim even more so that he can get to the line anymore. The guy who's the leading free throw shooter in the entire ACC and one of the top free throw shooters in Carolina history. Like, let's get him to the line as often as possible. And so I'd like to see that for RJ as well. And like, it's just hard because it is not the natural inclination for he or Caleb. But when I go to the collective of this group of the backcourt, I just want to see more sharing the ball. I want to see more ball movement. I want to see less ISO ball. I want to see more assists. Let's get that assist ratio back up over 50%. And then secondly, more role definition. And this is something you harp on a lot, Pac, but I think is something that I just feel like the more defined the roles are between who is the main playmaker or play initiator, maybe would be an interesting way to put it, and who is the main two. And then let's just know that well, because I think it helps this team really move forward. I think back a couple years ago for football where Michael Carter and the backfield, they just knew when each other was coming in and coming out, and it allowed them, there was just like a trust. If Caleb and RJ are still running the backcourt next year, I'd love to see that trust similar to what Michael Carter and Javonte Williams had that year, right? I just like that type of thing is where if they're going to both be back for a fourth year, let's see that bloom into fruition. Pac, anything else before we move on to unpacking it?
I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you and I both agree Caleb and RJ need improvement on the defensive end, stopping penetration, all that. How much of that, and you alluded to this earlier, how much of that, in your opinion, can be attributed to the fact that they're playing a ridiculously high amount of minutes?
I would say 75 to 80%.
I would agree.
I think they're in great shape. They're in great condition, or coach wouldn't even be trying to have them out there that much. But in order for them to carry the offensive load that they had to at times last year, because essentially it's them and Armando, right? Like there's just so many games when Pete isn't doing it and so many games when Leaky isn't doing it, that it really is dependent on those three guys. And so I think it's two things for me. You need another score. You need a fourth scorer similar to what the Tar Heels had last year with Manek, and you need more bench minutes. It doesn't have to be a ton more, but I think at least some more allows them, because I don't want to ask them to do less offensively. I want the offensive moments they spend to be more efficient, and then I want them to be able to give a higher defensive effort because they know that someone's coming in to spell them. And then they don't have to do everything offensively because they know that there's a fourth option alongside of them and Armando. What do you think?
No, you nailed it on the head. I totally agree. I don't even have anything to add. Perfect.
It ain't often, folks, but every now and again, Schade comes through with it. That's a great Pac. Seriously, though, that is a phenomenal question you just asked. And I think one that we'll probably end up spending a good bit of time on this offseason as we look ahead. So, folks, to wrap the show, we are going to move to our Unpacking It segment where we unpack something with Coach Pac Kilby. You get it, right? Yeah, I know you do. So what we want to look at is, what is this offseason work for the guards, and how do they bring in Simeon Wilcher well to do some of these things that we've talked about? And we'll do that in just a second. Okay, Unpacking It with Coach Pac Kilby. Pac, here we go. if we want these guards to be able to step in and do different and new things, continuing on some things that they're already doing well, growing in them even more, and then changing or growing in some of the things that they haven't done well. If you are Coach Hubert Davis, bring them into your office and tell me what you would say to these young men for this offseason.
Well, first of all, I think the biggest thing that has to happen, even I'm going to take a little bit of a step back. Before the conversation happens, the coaching staff needs to get together and they needed to figure out what direction we're going as a program. Okay. Let's assume we have everybody back. Simeon's coming in. The next thing that they need to do, once they have that direction, the role definition, it starts now. Okay. In all honesty, it starts now. It doesn't start in October right before the season starts. It starts now, and they need to sit down and they need to have those conversations. Here's your strengths. Here's your weaknesses. This is where we need to improve. But it doesn't stop there. It needs to be, this is what we see you doing for us next year, and this is how we're going to get there. It needs to be clear. It needs to be clearly defined, and everybody needs to be on the same page. That's where I feel like we weren't this year. There were no clearly defined roles. No one was on the same page. RJ and Caleb thought they were backpacking the whole team. Just wasn't a good marriage for our guard play. So we've got to correct that now. And then, I think when you pull them in, you as a player, you self-assess. So you're going to give them some say. Hey, what do you think your strengths are? What do you think your weaknesses are? Where would you like to see yourself? And then Hubert's got to say, okay, this is where we see you. I agree. This is your strengths. This is your weaknesses. This is how we want to attack them. And you set goals. Whether it's in the weight room, let's put this much weight on. Let's get to this squat max. That way you're becoming stronger. You're becoming more explosive. You're becoming quicker, more dynamic, whatever it is. Then you start looking at, okay, Trimble, for example, you need to shoot the basketball better. What are we doing to fix that? You're going to get in the gym with me or with whoever it is, and we're going to shoot 1,500 shots a day, game speed shots, and we're going to get better. And they're going to be shots that we get within our offense, so that when you step on that court with your teammates, you know what your role is, but you also trust the work, you trust your preparation, you have the confidence to play well. So, to me, that's what an off season. That's how it starts, and that's what it should look like. And then it's up to, at that point, the players to buy into that, embody that, and then find ways to achieve those goals and get better, so that we can have a cohesive group, on the floor next year. And then the next part is on Coach Davis. You got to trust the work you put in on the offseason. You got to trust your vision, and then you've got to trust them to actually play. We can't go back to these guys playing 36 out of 40 minutes. We've got to use all 4 or 5 guards that we have and make the most of them. So that's unpacking it. I think the biggest thing to me that was important that you said there is talking about the specificity of the goals. We can't talk in broad generalities of like, hey, you got to be a better shooter this next year. It's like, okay, you've got to be a better shooter. So here's what we're going to do to make that happen. And you walk out with actionable steps to progress towards that all offseason. I think that's just such an important part of that conversation. Pac, that's great stuff. I love it. And I cannot wait to have more of these conversations, because I think as disappointing as everything was this season, let's put some perspective on it. Like it gives you a hope and something to look forward to for next year, knowing like, man, this isn't how it's always going to be, right? There's a new season ahead, and there are things that are going to be, or at least I say, that you hope are going to be better and different. I guess there are some unknowns, certainly. And so we wait to see what all that will be. Great stuff looking at the backcourt. Just as a reminder, next week we'll do this same thing with the wings. And then 2 weeks from now, we will do the same thing with the front court. If you have questions or thoughts for either of these groups, send it in ahead of time so that we can be ready to answer it. Would love to be able to do that. But as for now, that's it for today's episode of Locked on Tar Heels. Please don't forget to leave some reviews on Apple Review. It helps the show so
much. You can follow us on Twitter, Locked On Heels. Follow Pac at Coach_K23. Follow me at Isaac Schade. You can email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Would love to talk with you there. Don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button, and comment on the show. And for your next listen, check out the brand new show on the Locked On Network, Locked On College Basketball, where we bring you everything you need to know from all around the college basketball landscape. Sweet 16 games starting tomorrow night. Can't wait for that. Make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Really appreciate you hanging out with us today, talking Carolina basketball and these guards. Want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Until tomorrow, peace.